Hi, my name is Barry Horner, and I'm your host on today's episode of Stake and Soul, the podcast that's dedicated to demystifying the world of employee ownership. Stake refers not just to the financial or beneficial ownership, but also to the vested interest, the sense of responsibility, and the feeling of belonging that comes with being an employee owner. Soul is all about company culture, the values, the shared purpose, and the human connection that are amplified and shaped by employee ownership. Soul is the company's silent language. Join us for Series 1 as we sit down with business leaders and CEOs who have successfully navigated their journey to employee ownership. Simon Morton is a passionate advocate for employee ownership and the transformative potential of the employee ownership EOT trust model. His latest book, Employee Ownership, A Guide to Transitioning from Boss to Benefactor, draws directly from his own experience leading Eyeful Presentations through its successful transition to employee ownership in September 2022. Written with warmth, wit, and hard-won insight, the book offers founders and leadership teams a clear-eyed guide to the emotional, cultural, and practical realities of the EOT journey. Building on the book's first success, Simon now runs People First EO, an advisory service under the Stepple Farm banner, helping businesses navigate their own employee ownership transitions with confidence and empathy. Simon's first book, The Presentation Lab, learned the formula behind powerful presentations, cemented his reputation as an internationally recognized expert in presentation development, and has been translated into 6 languages. Away from the keyboard, Simon describes himself as chief cook, bottle washer, and occasional procrastinator at Stepple Farm, with interests that include writing, radio, and walking. Simon, welcome to the Stake and Soul podcast. Great to have you on, and great to just start to get to know you a bit. We met, 6-8 months ago. It's been really lovely to meet with you a few times. You know, I'm a great fan of your book, which I have right by my side.
Bless you for that, Barry.
And you'll be pleased to know I've just ordered another 30 as we head on out to the EOA conference later this month. Then we've got plenty of supplies. So maybe a good place to start is just a bit more of an understanding about you, the business. Yeah, just give us a bit background on you, maybe, Simon, to start with, and then how Eyeful Presentations came about, and then we'll move on to, what led to a whole sort of succession conversation. So, sure. a bit of intro on you just to set the scene.
Well, it's my favourite subject, me, so I can go on for hours if you want me to. Potted history, first proper job after a couple of sort of things after university was working for a fintech. It wasn't a fintech at the time. Right. We were selling into accounts payable departments, helping people improve the efficiency of their payments process and improve security and what have you. That morphed into a fintech business, had investment, external investment, VC funding and what have you. And I was there for 13 years, so kind of man and boy. And it was a wonderful, wonderful company, still is a wonderful company. I'm meeting up with ex-colleagues for a meal in a couple of weeks' time.
Great.
And it was the best grounding I could possibly have had. So at this point, you might go, it all sounds wonderful. Why did you move on? And it was because we were about to start a family. So my wife, Lisa, was about 6 months pregnant when I went, I've had an idea. Why don't we jack in the really well-paid job with the company car and the pension and all of the good stuff? Because there was a lot of travel. I worked my way up the greasy pole and was in a pretty senior role, which meant that as a global business, I was spending a lot of time on planes. And I woke up one morning with that sort of awful feeling that I'm probably not going to see this child, we didn't know if it was a girl or a boy at that time, grow up. I might see them over a weekend, but it'll be reacquainting myself on a Friday and then goodbye on a Sunday night type thing. And that didn't seem to make a huge amount of sense. So incredibly naively, and the naivety of it was the superpower that I had, I think, when starting the business. And I've still got on the wall just by me here in my study, the first budget I wrote myself, which we wrote. Oh, wow. It's on a scrappy piece of paper, and we wrote it in a pub in a little village just outside Oxford. Lisa was on water. I was on a pot. Looking at the numbers, possibly a few pints, writing the numbers down. And I said, if we can do that in this new business, then we can afford to feed ourselves, clothe ourselves, and continue to pay the mortgage. So, like I say, incredibly naive. I had two ideas at the time. One was around presentations, so the company Eyeful Presentations. And the other one, which I will continue to say, highlights the fact that I'm a visionary, a very quiet visionary, but a visionary. It was called Eyeful Productions, and it was a podcast production company.
Okay.
Before podcasts existed.
Sure.
So that the distribution method was going to be on CDs, burnt CDs.
Oh, okay.
So that's how good the technology was at the time. Eyeful flew, Earful never really sort of got anywhere. So Eyeful was the one that we followed. That was born out of my frustration as somebody that was presenting a lot and selling a lot at the old company, at the quality of presentations that were being delivered, both being delivered, but also being on the receiving end. They were diabolical. And again, naively, I thought, well, I'm pretty good at PowerPoint. I'm sure I can sprinkle a bit of fairy dust over it. So if I can just get rid of a few of the bullet points and make the slides look a bit nicer, that's a step up in terms of quality. Very quickly, I realized, I wasn't as good at PowerPoint as I thought I was. So you end up bringing freelancers in, and that was a real step change in, stick to what you're good at. Yeah. But the big light bulb moment was when I identified that actually it wasn't the slides that were impacting the quality of presentations as much as the quality of the story.
Okay.
So actually, I can unpick this. I can kind of move that up, get rid of that bit completely. This was the time, frankly, still is the time, where people were leading with 5 slides about them and not talking about their audience in any way. And so these real simple sort of moments of clarity along the way, along with, ironically, working 18-hour days as you do when you're starting a business and all that sort of stuff, which meant I wasn't seeing my baby anyway, but I was still in the same house. At least I wasn't in an airport somewhere. Bit by bit, we grew and added people initially on a freelance basis, and then started building the employee team. And sort of fast forward, it was about 18 years, and grew pretty much consistently throughout that. We ended up at a point where I was ready to exit, and that's when we started kicking the tires of all the different options. Sure. The one that really resonated was employee ownership.
Well, what was the catalyst for, or you said it was an 18-year journey. What was the defining moment that made you think, do you know what, I'm not quite done with this, but I'm ready for something new, something else? Was there any particular time or event that occurred that just prompted you to think, enough's enough, I now need to hand the business over, and what are my options? Was there any particular?
Yeah, I'm being a little disingenuous in saying suddenly at 18 years, the clouds parted and the next sort of step became clear. Probably about 5 years prior to that, I was just absolutely shattered. And so we did. I fell into that trap. Don't know if you've ever been there, but I know lots of entrepreneurs and lots of founders that have, which is I attended a seminar that said, we can sell your business and you can live on a desert island and it's going to be amazing and you'll be on holiday the whole time. And I bought hook, line and sinker into that concept, and ended up writing a pretty large check at the time for them to create an information memorandum, which we had to end up redeveloping because it was so poor. And then just nothing happened. 2 meetings that were really just going nowhere. And the problem was 5 years ago, 5 years prior to actually doing it, that prompted a whole bunch of issues, personal issues, in the fact that there's a switch in your brain that suddenly goes, won't be long now until you've sold the business, and all the pressure you feel, all of those weekends working and the hassle, the people problems, or just the stuff that comes with running a business, all of that will be gone. And I'd find myself of a lunchtime looking at tractors. So
Right.
because we own a field, and I'm going to grow a vineyard. I'm going to do this, that, and the other. These crazy ideas, and suddenly your eye's not on the ball. And for a couple of years, we flatlined. We never really went down, but the business lost its momentum and its passion and what have you. So after eventually recognizing this thing ain't going to happen, then the next step was actually then going, okay, well, maybe I'm not the right guy to lead this business anymore. I'm just exhausted. My passion's gone. And so one of the team who happened to, prior to working on the team as a really successful consultant, was a long-term friend who I'd known actually at the previous organization. Brilliant guy, really smart, ticks all the boxes in terms of being the MD. So bring this guy in, I take a step back, and I failed him massively in terms of the quality of handover was wasn't pretty appalling, it was appalling. The communication to the team was poor. So there was suddenly, well, who's this guy? They knew him, but they knew him as a demanding consultant and certainly not the people process manager that an MD of a small business needs to be. So there was a real sort of jolt there. And that lasted about 3 months when he and I sat down for breakfast, and he had that sort of look in the eyes. It was going, this is not for me.
This isn't working.
And by then, bizarrely, I'd kind of got my mojo back. I was like, I love this business now. I've spent more time with our customers and enjoying that stuff. So, and so we swapped again. So that was a really interesting process, and I learned a huge amount through that.
I mean, you then have gone again. You got back in the business by the sounds of things, and then you went through perhaps a more robust process second time round. But what were the key learnings? Just thinking of anyone that might be listening or watching this podcast. What you said you got it wrong, and by your own admission, probably on both sides. What did you get wrong, and what would you do differently next time? And what are the key learnings through that process?
Take your time is probably the biggest thing, and view it very much as a gradual process. So this poor bloke was. We've had a number of meetings. We agreed a deal, shook hands, and kind of within a week or so, it was like, right, you're it now. I'm off. First of all, I'm going to take a couple of weeks to sleep, and so there was no proper handover. There was no on both sides chance to him to actually look over the fence and go, oh wow, that's what that role really is. It's just really easy, and I've had this conversation many times, to view a leader, MD, founder, CEO, whatever you want to call them, whatever the label. It's really easy from afar to go, well, that's a great job. You're in charge of everything. You've got control over everything. It's there's nothing that if you're a smart person, and this guy was incredibly smart, can't do. And then anybody that's done that role realizes it is the imposter syndrome is a huge issue, and it's one of the challenges that I think everybody faces. But I don't think this guy had expected quite that level of imposter syndrome. And also, it's the swan on the lake, and underneath the amount of paddling you're doing is immense. And so the lesson learned from that was take your time, be open book accounting in terms of the actual role itself. It's not always glamorous. Yes, it's got profile and status, and on LinkedIn it looks particularly impressive. But the reality is, it can be a pretty horrendous role sometimes. And when there's an issue, people look at you. When things are going great, they don't recognise you as part of that equation. So it's not a woe is me, but there's a strong caveat that says, before you put anybody into that role, make sure they're robust enough to for the role, and that you've given them the warts and all version of it.
Sure. In your reference to your book earlier, which I do read regularly and thoroughly enjoy, you talk about emotional detachment. And the stresses it stresses the sort of importance of the managing director, the CEO, letting go. How talk me through that a little bit in terms of how that was for you, both initially the thought of moving into potentially a business where others are going to be running it, you're going to be looking from the sidelines thinking, not sure I'd have done it like that. How has that played out for you? Because it is a real challenge, isn't it? In a employee-owned business, you're handing over the keys to something that you've, as you said, you've put 18 years into building that business. So, be interested in that aspect.
Yeah, I've been incredibly fortunate because had the business not succeeded under employee ownership, I'm sure my sense of that phase would be very different to what it is. The reality is that since I've taken a step back, the business has absolutely flown. Now, there may be an equation there that I need to explore a little bit. Take me out and then suddenly things fly. But no, the business has gone from strength to strength. It really has. And that's down to the leadership team that I put in place, but also the incredible people at Eyeful that have taken the baton individually and really sort of pushed it forward. So there is an emotional element to it. It was funny. I was in the office last week for our EOT trustee board meeting, and catching up with people, and there's some exciting things going on. One of the people that we took in as a junior salesperson has just been made director of the business. It's lovely to see his transition over the years, and is now a real sort of shining light in the business going forward. So really exciting stuff going on. But I did and I sort of said it, and it wasn't. I think it was taken in the right way. It's certainly meant in the right way. Is I recognise my business less and less every time I come in.
Right.
And that's had things not been going as wonderfully as they had been, had the vibe and that Eyefulness that you feel as soon as you go through the door, had that disappeared, and it was a business that was doing okay, but people are grumbling and it's not the happiest place, and customers are okay with it, there would be undoubtedly a sense of, what have you done to my baby?
Yeah.
Instead of that, I've now got the wonderful situation where it's, wow, look how my baby has flourished into this incredible business that he's it is unrecognizable in many ways to the thing that I left, but all the better for it.
Well, that's really interesting. So I think what I think you just described is the culture has continued, but the sort of the way perhaps the execution has changed. What was that culture that you introduced and brought into the business, and what aspects of that has continued, where you go into the firm and think, the foundations I built are still there? What were those cultural aspects that still resonate with you when you do meet the team?
It's really difficult to put your finger on, because without sounding horribly cliched. So there is a sense of family when you walk in there. There is, and interestingly, a third of the people that are there in the business now, I wasn't involved in recruiting. I had never worked alongside, but you still spot an Eyeful type person.
Yeah.
So there's we always kind of jokingly said, part of the interview process is, would you be happy to go for a pint with this person? Not from some sort of bro macho thing.
No, sure.
Could you spend some time with them? I read a book recently where somebody said it was a similar sort of thing, which is the airport test. Is, if you're in an airport and the plane's delayed by 2 hours, are you still going to have an engaging conversation with your colleague, or are you going to end up walking around the duty free because and it's that connection, and nobody's the same, but everybody's very similar in terms of the ability to get on and a warmth, a humour, all of those things, and also, frankly, the ability to work bloody hard when they need to, and the bar keeps getting raised higher and higher. So it's not some hippy dippy commune where everybody can just sort of lay back and let things happen around them. They are quite rightly, maintaining and improving the standard of our people. So a few people are falling by the wayside. It's just not the right fit for them. That doesn't take away from the culture, doesn't take away from the employee ownership element. You've still got to run a really successful business, and that's what they're doing.
We're jumping around a bit, which is absolutely fine.
What did you expect, Barry? Let's be honest.
Let's go back just to the decision to go down the route of employee ownership. How did you communicate that to the team initially, and how did you then go about? So I know for us back in 2019, it was a real challenge to find. I think the market's different now, and there are more providers of excellent services. But we struggled in the early days to find people that could sort of help us and guide us through, and we did receive a bit of conflicting advice. So what was the defining moment that made you think? I mean, perhaps it links back into the previous conversation, which is about culture. But what's the defining moment where you thought, actually, trade sale, other options are really not what I want. I'm going to go down the route of employee ownership. And then secondly, how did you go about, is there any learning for others about how you then think, who's going to guide me through this process? Never done it before. Who do I turn to? So just interested in exploring that a little bit.
So it was there were a few stages in the process. So Eyeful was owned 100% by me and my wife, Lisa. So we had the conversation where, just as husband and wife, where I think we're reaching the point now. Lisa was less involved in the business, but still carried a lot of the emotional weight of, when there were people problems, she would feel that as much as I would, and so you kind of had. It comes with so many benefits, but can sometimes also be a real challenge when a husband and wife team are talking about the business over the kitchen table. We tried very hard not to, but it naturally happened. So we both came to the conclusion pretty quickly. If anything, Lisa was probably slightly ahead of me in now's the time for us to realise the value of the asset that we've grown, or however you want to call it. And a good 50% of our initial push was, okay, trade sale, because that's what people do. That's your traditional approach. And at the same time, I'd been bit by bit building up the new leadership team that we're going to take over. And the rationale behind that was really simple. If I don't have a strong leadership team in place, if we go down the trade sale route, I'm going to be stuck then on an earn out, and I've heard nothing positive about earn outs. So it was like, that's purgatory. So I need to make sure that I am completely redundant by the point of selling. I then, with those two great guys, Luke and Lloyd, in place, it was like, actually, how can I make them really benefit from this as well? So I want my money, don't get me wrong, but how can I elevate those guys? And that's when third-party funding, be it PE or VC or what have you, was kind of mooted. And I didn't look at it with any great gusto, but it was very much, I need to explore it to a certain level so I can share that with Luke and Lloyd when I share the information. And last but not least, and at the time least, was employee ownership. It was our accountant had mentioned it a couple of times going, and I'd looked at it about a year previously. Something had come via LinkedIn or an email. And at the time, my reading of it was, right, oh, hold on. So what you're giving up your asset, and then you're having to wait maybe 5 years for the business, which hopefully is going to continue to succeed without you at the helm, to get your money back. Yes, there's the tax-free bit and what have you, but I don't see in that mercenary business style sort of a mindset. I thought that doesn't work for me. Interestingly, I know I'm jumping around awfully here. Interestingly, before that initial moments of thinking around EO, and then looking at it for a second time, the pandemic happened, and the pandemic completely changed my view of my business, because my business pre-pandemic was a headache, but it paid well. It was something I was proud of, but sometimes it was a royal pain in the backside. But I'm sure you'll get the tiny violin out at this point, but you do feel a bit gilded cagey in the fact that I'm living in a house I've never dreamt of driving a car. I would, beyond my wildest dreams, but I'm still not happy and I'm still not content because actually the way to get there is not the happy place I've hoped or thought it would be. Pandemic happened, and the business, and rather its people, demonstrated to me what an incredible bunch of people it was. It was a real moment where everybody galvanized, everybody pulled together. We'd squirreled away some rainy day money, and so we certainly didn't have to go down the route of loans or any of that mucky stuff. I think we had 3 people on furlough and got them back very, very quickly. And there was a general sense that the way we galvanized as a business, like I say, and communicated, looked out for each other, people were, sort of reaching out to each other as mates and colleagues just to make sure everybody was okay. There's a lovely picture of 2 of our guys, 2 of the design team, who were mates outside of work, and as soon as they could do, got a can of lager each and a deck chair and sat in a park, the legal distance apart, and had a beer together because it was the first time they could do it. And moments like that made me think, well, this is what this business is about. Yes, the service we provide is important and all of that good stuff, but I hadn't realised that we'd built a community as well. And so when we kind of came out the other end of that, and there was a bit of post-traumatic stress, I guess. Pandemic was very much, I need to be the leader, step up and be the positive force all the way through. About 6 months after that, I then kind of really felt the stress of the pandemic. So it was kind of, it was very much delayed. And that it was at that point, it was like, okay, I've got these 2 great leaders that throughout the pandemic had continued to step up and continue to be these remarkably positive, insightful, innovative leaders, and there's me absolutely knackered. It was like, okay, now's the time. Now's the time. And then we looked at the 3 options, and then suddenly employee ownership made so much more sense because it was about the community and the people. And we've talked about this previously, but the magic number bit was so vital. By magic number, I mean is what's the number that Lisa and I would be comfortable with selling the business for? What's the number that we need? Any more than that, that'd be lovely, but we don't need it. Any less than that, we'll delay. And so we got some basic sort of valuations, and we hit our magic number on the most conservative evaluations. It's like, great, we're in a position to start looking at this seriously now.
Yeah.
So when I sat down, the initial piece of communication was with Luke and Lloyd, and it was I didn't sleep well the night before because I was going to sit down in our boardroom and say, guys, you're doing a brilliant job. I think it's time for me and Lisa to take a step back. We want to sell the business, and we've got 3 different options here. I thought they'd either run a mile or push me out of the way as quickly as they possibly could do. And it was maybe because we were the 3 Cavaliers, we had this strong bond between the 3 of us. When I sat down with them, they weren't surprised, and they were very thoughtful about the whole process. So I said, look, option 1 is trade sale, and I'm going to give you all 3 options, and you tell me which one you think is most appropriate. Option 1 is trade sale, which means that I'm probably going to be okay, but you might end up working for a company that you may not wish to work for. So, but I'm going to be completely honest with you, completely transparent here at the pros and cons. Same with the PE funding thing, which I thought they'd go for, because a younger version of me would have gone, oh, I could make a load of money if this works out. 3-5 year sort of cycle, and suddenly I'm walking away with a very nice number. And they, for the same reasons as the trade sale cons, said, don't know that that's going to work for us individually, and then collectively. That they came back with that feedback, which is we don't want to be working for some faceless funder who's just going to basically tighten everything. The culture that we've built, the autonomy that we have individually, all of that will go out the window. So tell us more about this employee ownership thing. So went through that, not selling it, just explaining what it is. And they said, well, that's the obvious one. For our business. The one interesting question they raised was, but are you okay with that? Because you're not going to get your money in one big check. You're going to have to, and all of those sort of things. And we said, no, we are very much at peace with that. That's not a problem at all. So immediately, it was done in half an hour. Right. It was very much like, wow, okay, that's great. Now let's get to work in bit by bit, starting to put the pieces in place. And it was, in the book, I refer to it as the inner circle. So this inner circle of people, our accountant we brought in at the time, who's now our independent trustee as well. So Jeff has been a long-term player in this whole journey. We kind of really hunkered down and just made sure that we had the right things. We spoke to a number of different advisors and ended up working with Baxendale, who I'm sure you know. Right. There's Simon Everingham, who was just the perfect fit for us. He got us as a culture, was willing to answer the same stupid question 3 or 4 times and not lose his patience, all of the things that you need in a strong advisor. So when we got to the point where we'd had the HMRC approval and all of that stuff, we then shared it with the wider team. And Simon from Baxendale was part of that presentation.
What's the time frame there from you and Lisa coming up with, we think this is the right thing for us, through to communicating that with your 2 musketeers, through to then the wider team? And I guess a wider question is, in advising other businesses, sometimes you occasionally hear stories where the business goes through the whole process of becoming employee owned, and then they tell the team. Yes. I mean, for us, we told our team sort of 12 to 18 months before and took them on the journey, which I think worked really well for us. But again, in terms of just, do you think you did it right? Was the timing of communication about right? And if you had your time again, would you do it in any way, in a different way?
It's one of the things I'm most proud of is the way that we communicated it to the team. I think, communication is kind of our stock in trade anyway, as Eyeful. So if we messed this up, then we probably needed a bigger word with ourselves. So the conversations that Lisa and I had, and looking at the different options, were probably 18 months before we actually did it. Right. Then it was probably only 3 months or so. And it wasn't the only thing we talked about. It was just starting to gather momentum as a concept. 3 months later, we sat down with Luke and Lloyd and said, look, this is the direction of travel. It was maybe 9 months. Some dates are all a bit in my mind now, but 9 months from the initial, we're going to do this, through to telling the guys. It would have been about 9 months, maybe 8 or so. And we did exactly what you did. Is we told the team before the paperwork was signed and all of that stuff. So that was another month or so, I think, before we did all of that. That piece of communication, in the book, I talk about people, process, and communication. The communication bit is not important for big chunks of time, but when it's the focus, my God, it's the focus. You've got to be 100% committed to that and really, really dive into that in great detail. It's not, well, I'll knock up a few slides a couple of days beforehand and then just share with the guys. You've got to, we rehearsed, we really went through it in every level of detail, FAQ documents, the whole lot. And then when we actually did the deal and did the sign, what I thought was going to be a bit like signing when you take on a new striker at a football team, there'd be pictures and us signing with a fountain pen. It was all Adobe online signing and couple of clicks of a mouse, and that was it. But what we did do then is have a party at the office, and a key thing for that was, because they were now co-owners. It wasn't just a party for the employees; it was their partners, their kids. We had a bouncy castle, we had barbecue. It turned into a real event,
celebration.
And my wife's counsel, she said, "We'll stay for a couple of drinks, and before you start getting emotional and huggy, which I have a propensity to do, we'll exit stage right." So we did that.
Yeah, very good. Interested in the way that you communicated with Lloyd in terms of it felt like, and I don't know whether this is the case, you almost gave them an option. And I'm just interested, if they'd have turned around and said, "We really like the private equity thing," where would that have left you? Because I've not come across anyone else. I mean, we went through clearly a similar process, evaluating all the options, but for us, from a sort of cultural values, retaining the team, legacy, all the good reasons why many businesses go down the route of employee ownership, we totally discounted. We'd spoken to loads of other businesses and just thought that's more around value destruction than value accretion. I guess it could have turned out quite differently if they'd turned around and went, "Actually, we quite like these other options." I guess just what made you present a range of options to them as opposed to sort of almost selling the sizzle on employee ownership?
Probably the best way to answer that is, we talked previously about culture. And again, this popped up in a conversation only a couple of weeks ago, where we were talking about how Eyeful pre-EOT was pretty EO in its culture. We were, it was... somebody described me as a benevolent dictator, which I kind of took as a positive sign after I kind of unpicked the dictator bit. But they're probably right. Back in the day, I couldn't have gone, "Guys, we're doing this." It had to be, certainly for that leadership team, to have the sense of autonomy and ownership. It had to be a team decision. It had to be a team choice. If I'd gone, "Look, there are 3 different options here, but this is the one we're going for, and these are the reasons why," and really sold it hard, you would then end up kind of creating more mystique about the other 2. It was I don't play poker, but my cards were stacked in my favor because I knew the mentality and the importance of the culture to both Luke and Lloyd. So I kind of knew where they were going to go. There was an outside chance that they might look at the PE firm, but interestingly, one of those guys, his wife had worked for a PE-backed business and said it's a nightmare. So again, I kind of knew where we were heading, but I thought it was important for them to understand. A lot of the developments of those guys over the 18 months leading up to this was about exposing them to the real world of business. And we've got choices, and there's an education element around all of these different things. These are the impacts. Sure. I said, Lisa and I will get more money if we go down the trade sale or the PE way, just because of the way it works. However, we've got our magic number, and I shared with them what that magic number was. And again, that was
Oh, did you? Yeah.
Yes, and this is before we'd sold, before any valuation. Well, actually, we'd had rough valuations, but I shared that magic number with them, which was a real test of trust, because they may have looked at me going, "You're smoking dope," or "You greedy, what's it?" or whatever. Yeah, there could have been a lot of negative responses, and interestingly, their responses, individually and together, was, "Yeah, you deserve that." And
that's brilliant, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the quality of the people I was working with. I'm very fortunate to have had that quality of conversation with people like that.
Definitely. In terms of, you said that your business is really built around communication. It sounds like perhaps the initial communication of the person you brought in wasn't brilliant, but actually you've learned from that, and the whole process of then going through becoming EO has gone incredibly well. Did you have any skeptics in your wider team where they went, "Well, yeah, it's all right for him"? Because often when I chat to businesses, you get this sort of, almost a group which might be a third of raving advocates. I completely get why you'd want to do this. How amazing. That's brilliant. You get another third who are, oh, yeah, sounds okay. And then you get another third who are sort of skeptics, and well, that's all right for Simon, of course. How did that play out, and what was your communication around that? And did you have people that were perhaps a bit skeptical about the whole thing? Because it's a bit of stepping into the unknown, isn't it? You're communicating to the wider team you're going to be a beneficial owner. It's like, what the hell is that? So how did you go about that? And what was the, just again, thinking of folk listening to this podcast, what does great communication look like? You've already talked about some of it, but how do you deal with skeptics? And I guess another question would be around how did you communicate with clients, for example? Because again, probably quite a lot of the relationships over time were, we deal with Simon, we deal with Eyeful, but actually Simon's our main contact. So how did you manage that process?
So very quickly, the employee, the customer one, I'd again in building up Luke and Lloyd as the leaders of the business, I had very purposefully kind of extracted myself. I had a few specific client relationships, but I was part of a team that was delivering for them. So they'd bring me in as the story guy or the workshop guy, rather than just being the only person that they might work with. I also, in preparation for that, removed my face from the website as much as possible, because again, being that founder, it's really easy, and it's not an ego trip, but it's very easy. Suddenly all of the blogs are written by you. All of the videos feature your face. And it's like, if I'm not careful, whichever way we went down, nobody wants my, probably impacting valuation as well, but nobody wants me being front and center of all of the positioning of the business. So we started that process. So Eyeful was seen as a group of people rather than one individual at the top of the tree. So I think we kind of did a good job on that stuff. The communication, I think that I'm trying to think of overt skeptics, and I'm struggling to think of any individuals that went, maybe not. What's been interesting is, and I know this is so at the point of communication, I took my time to really go through it again, without wanting to push the book too hard. In the book, I break down that whole sort of presentation into the key chapters, and we recorded it so people could rewatch it. We did sort of FAQ documents which they could share, because we recognised, and that kind of comes from our heritage in presentations, is our audience wasn't just the employees sat in that room that we've called together for a company meeting. It was also their partners, many of whom, being the business that we are, I've met them when they first started going out together, when they got married, when they started raising a family. So the network that you're communicating this really quite a big news to isn't just the people in the room. And and that helps us sort of manage the message in such a way, because I know that if I'd been on the receiving end, I'd have gone back that night and gone, I think it's good news. I'm now co-owner of Eyeful Presentations. To which Lisa would have gone, is the house at risk? And all of the things that would have, with a sort of a blunt, retelling of that message. So things like the FAQs document was written as much for the people in the room as it was for the people at home as well. We took our time. It's a thick old document, and again, it's in the book, just breaking it all down so people understand it. And then, really importantly, I think we shared the information on the Thursday. On the Monday, we then booked in a bunch of meetings, which was ask me anything sessions, which was that there's no question too daft to ask. There might be some questions that I won't share with you. So for example, if you want to tell me how much we're selling it for, I'm not going to tell you that. But please come with questions that you've got or your partner's got, or the fact that you mentioned it to your mom over Sunday lunch and she thought this was weird, and what about this? And we just managed that. So at the end of many of those sessions, the feedback was, well, we can see what's in it for us, but are you sure you're looking after yourself, aren't you, Simon? And that was a real measure of, okay, we've got the messaging right. Subsequent to that, the party where we had partners coming up and sort of giving hugs and saying this is really exciting and what have you. I know I'm talking a lot, so feel free to cut me off at this point. But communication post deal is really, really important. So we're 3 and a bit years in now. Mm-hmm. 4 years in. Time has flown by. For the first year I stuck around, I was there 3 days a week, maybe 2 days a week, doing very much chairman-like stuff. So I wasn't running the business at all at that point. I think people were surprised when they saw me in the office, and then probably wondered what I was doing in the office because Luke and Lloyd were doing such a good job running the business anyway. But naturally what happens maybe 2 years in, 18 months, 2 years in, is people kind of go, well, what's the big deal? Nothing's really changed. And we knew that was coming. And so one of the things that we did, which I'm pretty sure is not the standard, because I've not heard many people do it, is we built into the contract the repayment schedule. Rather than every piece of profit we can, we'll scrape out and we'll just speed up the repayment process. We said over a certain level, anything over that, we'll split 50-50 with the employees or the co-owners, and then Lisa and I. So yes, if the business is going gangbusters, great, we will get to financial freedom day quicker. But at the same time, the co-owners will see some benefits early on. And they did. So they've not had to wait the 5-7 years that I hear lots of people talk about for them to receive profit sort of tax-free bonuses. They've had that. We also spent money on putting in medical that wasn't in place before. So, and now there's an incredible benefits package that again has been funded through becoming employee-owned. That wouldn't have happened previously, with some incredible things like they've got this thing called a dream ball thing, which is allowing people to put in their wildest dreams. Yeah, if you had £5,000, what would you spend it on? And we every 6 months or so they pull out one of these balls. The balls are there in the office, and it's kind of like a bingo machine. Pulls it out. Right. And we've had one of the guys, Chet, was able to take his family, including his kids, to see his relatives in India. I think his grandparents in India, who would never have seen his kids. He would never have been able to make that trip. But being an owner of the business allowed him access to the benefits that allowed him to do that, and a whole host of other things, IT support, budgets and training budgets, inspiration budgets. The list goes on, and that's all funded because we did that contract in a way that said, look, if you're flying, you should benefit from this as well, and it's not just keep paying, stop moaning, and then it's yours. It needs to feel like co-ownership from day one. And I would implore anybody looking at doing a contract, if you can factor something in that gives a little bit of that benefit early on, then that really helps.
So was that the way you structured that? Was that if the business glide path typically looks like this is business as normal, but actually if we do super profit, that's when you get your deferred consideration paid earlier and you put more back into the bonus pot, essentially? Is that
making the numbers up? But if our repayment every year was £100, the planned repayment, anything over £100 would be split 50-50. So if the business had profits available of £150, we'd take 125, and then there was 25 left in the pot for the trustee to decide what to do with. So, people to, so that was where, people have been able and really benefited from things like, the medical cover that they didn't have previously.
Amazing.
And all of the other things that we talked about.
which brings us on to owner mindset, which I know is a conversation you and I have had, where we talk a lot in employee-owned businesses about think like an owner. How do you encourage an owner mindset? I mean, I guess what you've just articulated to me is amazing worked examples of what does it mean actually to be an owner of an PO business. Are there any other tips, thoughts you've got around how you know, sometimes you do get this sense, I guess, of partners going, it doesn't feel very different. We've become employee owned. And that's partly, as you've also said, the nature of the culture of the business pre and post doesn't materially change your style of leadership and what have you. But then occasionally you do hear some examples, and as I say, you've just given us a couple of really phenomenal ones. Are there other things that you've brought in that, again, it would be helpful for others to hear around how you encourage that owner mindset, that sense of actually, no, we're all in this together in a way perhaps we weren't before?
I think actually it's probably important to say we haven't cracked it. So there are still pockets of employee thinking versus owner thinking, and that's an ongoing frustration. Frustration, and that's probably just a reality check. We can't live in this lovely bubble and assume everything is wonderful. Really, again, last week I was in the office, and there was a great example of ownership thinking in somebody that had basically said, "This is how I want my career to evolve," and they actually identified the job title they wanted in 5 years' time, and they plotted out how the business was going to help them through this. As an employee owner, they'd identified, or a co-owner, they'd identified what training they required, what investment they needed, part they were going to play, and they'd really plotted it out. There was a real sense of vision, but it wasn't just, I want this role. It was a vision based on the fact that as a co-owner, I can make this happen. I work in a business, I co-own a business that will allow me to make this happen. And it was a really wonderful moment. And this particular person is a shining light anyway in terms of that type of thinking. He's actually one of the employee trustee directors.
Right.
So really gets it. At the same time, there will be people going, "Oh, well, I'm working too much overtime," and sort of the more short-term tactical responses to being part of an EO business, rather than saying, "What do we do as a business to improve it?" is looking at other people to fix the problem for them,
Sure.
So I don't know what the split is. I think it's moving more towards the ownership thinking, but you'll still have some laggards there that will go, "Well, yeah, we get the bonus, we get this, but what's the big deal?" And in the nicest way, they're the people that will get left behind. Because this experience of just seeing this person, she sat down and she said, "Oh, Morts, this is the plan. This is where I want to get to, and this is how I'm going to get there," was one of those moments. I came home and told Lisa all about it. I said, "That's what employee ownership's about, is the fact that this person feels so enabled now to do this thing." That's really, really powerful. But I don't think there are no obvious quick wins. One of the biggest challenges is probably will be a nice problem to have. Well, maybe is at the point of Financial Freedom Day, Eyeful will be creating and is creating good numbers, and there will be money to be shared around. But if you're not careful, you run that risk of it. Oh, right, employee ownership means profit share. And I've said time and time again, sometimes quite vociferously, if this was just about profit share, I wouldn't have sold the business to its employees. I could have done profit share anyway. That's dead easy. And lots of other companies do it. Employee ownership is that really complete shift in thinking. This is something that you're doing. Now, there are examples where Eyeful's done that very well. So the community stuff that they're doing now, I wouldn't have done previously. And they are now doing some incredible things with local schools and universities. The charitable stuff, I jokingly said, because we called it out as a good example of what employee ownership is. One of our team, her husband was very critically poorly with a brain tumour, and the NHS and this ward did an incredible job with him. He's back on his feet. You'd never know. Lovely bloke. Now, back up and doing it. And the business, led by this person, said we should do something for that incredible ward. So the entire business shut down for the day, and we did a sponsored walk. Ended up raising thousands upon thousands in sponsorship, which was wonderful. And I said to Luke, who's running the business now, I said, have you worked out what that cost the business in terms of taking everybody out for the day? And he said, I've done the numbers. Yeah. Old Simon would have gone, well, I'm not giving up that amount of revenue or that amount of margin for a day. But as an employee-owned business, everybody agreed it was the right thing to do. What was amazing was that co-owners were all on. I joined the walk as well. It was a wonderful day, but they were bringing their partners, their kids along as well. And it was a real sense of, this is what this employee ownership thing's about now.
Yeah. Yeah, it goes back to what you were saying earlier about family, I think, in terms of doing that stuff together. How do you, in terms of structure and governance in the business, what's the broad structure? How has that changed since becoming employee-owned? And have you, post becoming employee-owned, changed that at all? Or pretty well, did you get the structure, the corporate governance, the trust board, and whether you have a sort of partner voice type of group in place? How does that work? How do you within the business facilitate that process of really hearing across the business what's going on and how people are feeling?
So a few things. So the business is Eyeful itself is still run very much as a business, with Luke at the head of the business now, and sort of running that business day to day and providing the leadership there. That business then reports up to the trustee board, of which Luke is on. I'm on as a founder director. We have Jeff, who's our accountant, as our independent, and then 2 employee directors as well. Those employee directors play a really important role throughout the year, and certainly at those quarterly trustee board meetings, because we run a employee survey weekly called Office, using a system called Office Vibe. And Office Vibe is temperature check on how people are feeling, how they feel in terms of their progression, the investment, the support they're getting, all of those sort of things. Again, this was one of the things that I wouldn't have had in place, but the new leadership, when we passed the baton over, went, we need this. We need to make sure that we're taking a temperature check for that. The net result of that is that we identified where the problems were, and some of those were at a management level, some of those were in a structural level, some of them were just people that weren't the right fit. Great, we can work with that. As a quick aside, off the back of that, the guys have won a Good Business Charter and recently a Great Place to Work, and were top 10 great place to work in the creative industry. I mean, just remarkable type of stuff. So that taking a temperature check and taking that temperature check seriously was really important. That is another sign of how the business is talking and thinking differently about itself. Previously, I would have gone, but there's always a few people that moan, so we can ignore them. The new culture is, okay, there may be just a handful, but have they got something valid to say? What's the kernel of this? Is it particular team's not quite right? Now, we don't deal with that information at the trustee board. We're not going to micromanage the business, but we will identify if there are problems. And the example I always use is, if it's a small number of people going, my review has been delayed yet again, and it's sort of the third time in 3 months, that's a problem. If it's a handful of people in a team, that's a management problem. If across the board people are going, we are not invested in, we don't feel invested in, and our reviews are always pushed to the back of the queue, That's something that the board needs to go, hold on, this is not what we do as a business, or this is not what you should be doing on our behalf as a business. And we've wrestled a lot with what is trustee stuff and what is, day-to-day stuff. And the guys put in place what they call the Eyeful Forum, which is an opportunity to gather outside of the office vibe survey things that need to be sort of discussed and brought out. Some of them make them up to trustee board level, and some of them are a day-to-day management thing. Initially, it was, oh, good, I'm an employee owner. Can we have a pinball machine in the office?
Yeah.
Well, that has nothing to do with being employee owned. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Brilliant. Again, when you and I have got together and chatted, we often talk about all the good stuff of being employee owned, and that's covered well in your book. But we also have talked about the challenges, and it isn't the magic bullet where there is a requirement to pay out deferred consideration. There's all sorts of challenges. We've covered a little bit of that on the podcast this morning in terms of owner mindset and how do you change that mindset. Are there any other, what else goes through your mind, particularly when you were writing the book and from your own experience? Where are the pressure points? And again, for those perhaps listening to the podcast thinking, is EO right for me? It's great that we talk about all the virtues and all the good stuff, but it's also really important that we also cover the not so good stuff. From your side, from your perspective as author of a key book on the subject and someone who's run a EO business, what do you think are the not so good things about employee ownership, and have you got any thoughts as to how they might be resolved or overcome?
I think I didn't realise how much communication would continue to be required through the process. Now, I love and value communication, but it's really easy for the business, any business, to just kind of fall back into a bit of a rut. And so it's not about banging the drum, we're employee owned, and as a result, it's the solution to all problems. But it's important to sort of shine a light on the impact that it has, because people have pressures in their lives. People will not always be happy clappy about the fact that they own a business where actually they think that they're underpaid, or the price, grocery bill goes up by a tenner every time they go to Sainsbury's, and all of those sort of things. So I think that the importance of recognizing the part that employee ownership plays in the way the business runs is an important push, but it's not. Don't view it as, well, that's employee ownership is this thing that fixes all ills. If you've got a badly performing business pre-EO, guess what? It's going to be a badly performing EO business, and if anything else, it might bring out some of those challenges even more. So, kind of go into it with eyes open. Like I said, I'm very fortunate in the fact that I don't have many concerns, because it's gone as well as it possibly could do, and I'm very, very fortunate on that side. I think that on a personal level, then this is exit full stop. But certainly the gradual process that you have with it from an EO perspective, there are a few things to just go in with both eyes open. I now feel obsolete in our business, and that was the business that I started, and I'm 99% of the time that's as per the plan. I was not supposed to be the person that people would turn to and listen to now at this stage of the process. But that 1%, be it ego, be it the sort of the muscle memory of status or whatever it might be, is I'm seeing the stuff that Eyeful does now, and I go, wow, that's a young man's game, or whatever cliche you want to use. It's beyond me. The speed of thought, the quality of execution is not something that I jokingly said to one of the directors, actually it was jokingly, he said to one of the directors the other day, I don't think you'd employ me. He said, you'd make second interview. second round interview. So it's kind of, and there was banter and all of that sort of stuff there. But it does make me think, wow. Now, I take great solace from the fact that I timed the exit perfectly, and I handed it on to an incredible bunch of people who have lent into it and made the most of it. Had we done this with the same company 10 years previous, I didn't have the right people in place. We didn't follow a right process. Communication would have been pretty awful. I would not be as happy as I am now. So you've got to put those blocks in place.
Yeah. Did you get any coaching, Simon, around that letting go process? And I mean, it sounds like you've done it incredibly well. And having chatted with some other businesses where the whole idea is on the Friday there's the handover, on the Monday they're still back in the office, sort of leading the business. And it sounds like from what you've said there was a sort of initial bit of a bump in the road, but then when you've got your two musketeers in place, it's gone pretty well. But it is a massive adjustment for someone, and you run the business for 18 months. Is that just something you've negotiated with Lisa and gradually just come to terms with, or did you have any counsel or coaching through that sort of letting go process?
No, there's a huge amount of information out there about how to, not necessarily let go of your business, but how to retire early. I was 55 when no, younger than that, 54 when we sort of went through that process. Part of it was born out of it was my decision, so I wanted to make sure that I managed that process well. My dad was old school, and so very much he was defined in many ways by his role and his status. He was very senior within the organisation he was in. He worked and then retired, and then kind of had to try and find himself, and didn't have the best of retirements, and had ill health, and sadly is no longer with us. So that's not what I wanted. So this idea of make the choice now and bit by bit taper off was a choice that I made. Going back to my dad, one of his best mates works very senior role in the oil industry. And he and his wife, when they were preparing for retirement, were put on a week-long course on how to be retired. And that, I thought, was a really interesting thing. Wow, you've got to. If people talk about stages of life and the next act and all that sort of stuff, you don't just find yourself there. You've got to prepare yourself. You've got to put the work in, be it YouTube videos or books or articles, and just have a word with yourself. I still have a full diary. We were joking before the recording about, I don't know how I managed to squeeze it all in, but my work muscle memory is there are certain blocks in the week where I will do certain things. After this, so Wednesdays are my hiking day. So I've got a day hike after this. And, unless things are really, really important, that day hike doesn't get moved. And it's just having structure and doing all the things you want to do. I jokingly say in the book, my fear was that my retirement would be, it's Homes Under the Hammer. Excellent. I haven't seen this one. And is it 12 o'clock too early to crack open the first beer? And all of those concerns, and they are kind of play in the back of your mind. You've got to go into it with the same gusto you did that you had when you started that business. You've proven that you've got that gusto. Now throw it into this next act.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I've read a book recently. I'm a keen book reader. Celia Dodd, "Don't Fade Away," and it really echoes what you've just said, really, which is about having a plan. I'll put it in the show notes because it is a good book, and it just encourages that you do have a plan. So it isn't the sort of retirement on the Friday and then what am I going to do? How many rounds of golf can I play? And it talks about the sort of starting to embed things in your life 5 years before you eventually do stop work, which is something I've gradually tried to do. We're coming towards the end of the podcast, and there's a little section we have which is sort of espresso shot quick fire questions. So the first one is, finish the sentence, Simon. Employee ownership is...
the best business decision I ever made.
Excellent. My biggest EO surprise was
how much work it requires to keep the communication fresh and engaged. I think that's probably, that's the biggie for me. It doesn't stop when the deal is done.
Sure. A book that you've read could be an EO book that's inspired you, and you can't have your own books in that category.
Because there's a really good book, as you know. I've got two. I knew you were going to ask me this question. So for the leaders of the EO business, that I suggest this, the John Timpson book, Upside Down Management. I'm a big fan of Timpson anyway, and what he's done with what so many people wouldn't see as cobblers sort of shops. The way he works with society and has done some incredible things. We're also hoping to nick his idea of holiday homes for employees. And so he's got holiday homes dotted around, and we want to do the same sort of thing that says that the trust the business has bought somewhere, it's yours to use. Have a booking system and what have you. So again, it's another thing that as a co-owner of the business, you've got access to something like that. So that would be for the leaders of the business. I'd love more people, co-owners across the business. I know it's an oldie, but it's very much a goldie. Good to Great by Jim Collins, which I think is just a fantastic book. Read it umpteen times. Whenever I was in that moment of how am I going to shift the needle? As a business owner, the old style business owner, this was very, very inspiring. As a co-owner, I really want to. I'd love that same sense of connection across the board. So those would be the two I'd recommend.
Great book.
If I'm allowed to.
Perfect. Yes, you are. And finally, we have a CEO confessional. Okay, so you have a choice here. There's a moment of honesty. So that's a time when you made a significant mistake, a decision you regret, or a moment of self-doubt. So that's one, moment of honesty. Second one is an unfiltered story. Tell a story about a setback in the company, a time you had to fire someone you liked, which I had to do in the very early stage, painful thing, or a secret struggle, something like imposter syndrome. So you've got the choice of moment of honesty, unfiltered story, or secret struggle.
Right. Well, I think I've probably shared some unfiltered stuff talking about the failed attempts at MDs and what have you in the past, and they have a long tail, those mistakes, because the friendship I had with that person has never truly recovered, and that kind of lives with me a bit. So I'll try and find something a little bit just in terms of running a small business. So many moons ago, when I first started, we had one of the 0800 number thing, and it was answered by a centralized call center, the type of thing that you'd pay every time the phone was answered and a message was taken. And it was great because at the time there was me and a bunch of freelancers. We didn't have an office. We certainly didn't have anybody answering the phones. So we'd use this call answering service. And it was on everything, all our printed documentation, our website and what have you. And I got a call through onto my mobile from a customer that I've been working with going, I don't know what's going on. I've just called your office number and I got the Tesco yogurt and smoothie helpline. I said, pardon? He said, I thought, that's strange. Anyway, we had a chat. I then called this number and it was answered Tesco yogurt and smoothie helpline. And what had happened was the number had been sort of duplicated. Or my number basically had just been handed over to Tesco.
Right.
And so I said, I called up the company that I was working with, saying, "Look, there's a bit of a problem. My number, it would seem, is now the Tesco yogurt and smoothie helpline." I mean, they said, "Oh, let me look into that." Called me back about 2 days later and said, "Yeah, we do have a slight problem. That number has been printed on 3 million yogurt pots and smoothies across Tesco's but we have a solution. And I said, oh, well, what's your solution? He said, well, we either give you a new number. I said, well, that's not going to work because our customers know our number. They said, we thought you might say that. So how about this? We pick the people ring. If you want yogurt and smoothie helpline, press 1. If you want Eyeful Presentations, press 2. Well, that's not going to bloody work either, is it? So eventually we got a new number, and they gave us a few quid to sort out sort of communication. But Beth, my eldest, the baby that prompted this whole adventure, I remember sat in her nursery. She was tiddly, must be 4 or 5 months old, just rocking her gently to sleep, going, what are we going to do, Beth? What are we going to do with it? I'd never seen this coming. So it's I can smile about it now, but at the time I was thinking, I can't take on the might of Tesco's and their yogurt department. It's probably beyond us. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much, Simon. Amazing insights there. Great to just hear your journey, some of the good things, some of the things you do differently. I'm sure that will be a huge inspiration to many folk looking at the process of either building their employee-owned businesses or making the decision to become employee-owned. So really grateful for your time and your honesty and candor as you've just talked through your stories, and hope you have an amazing hike. Where are you hiking today? Where's the hike today?
Sort of a Ludlow Broomfield thing. So it's 8-9 miles, something like that. Strangely, always ends up in a nice country pub. So that is strange, isn't it? Yeah, it is strange.
Yeah.
So
Brilliant.